Hey, welcome everybody. Listen, we're going to have a really good time with you today. And visiting on the program today is David Talley. He's coming from Jerusalem. This is what we're going to be talking about. The balagons that are happening in America and in the United States. Here we have cities that are being lit on fire. We have our elections coming up. Over in Israel, they have their own issues over there. But also at the same time, we have these peace deals that are going on. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to get the perspective from Israel, from David Talley, former IDF major and tank commander. He's joining us from Jerusalem in front of one of the cafes because Israel is still on a lockdown like we are here in America. David, welcome. We have a lot to talk about.
Let's do this. Jerusalem is amazing. The weather is changing finally. We had a couple of very hot days, very scorching days. But there's nothing like the cool breeze of Jerusalem in the evening. And let's jump in and talk about, well, there's a lot of things going on your side and a lot of things going on our side. And there are a lot of things that are connecting your side and our side, including what just now happened a couple of days ago.
Oh, yeah. You have over there in Israel right now, people in America aren't seeing this because we're seeing a lot of other things. But there are protests against your prime minister, aren't there?
Oh, yeah. Every weekend we're having major demonstrations actually across the street in the middle of downtown Jerusalem, probably in places that some of you might even recognize on King George Street, actually protesting and calling for Benjamin Netanyahu to resign. The short version of that is that he's has been indicted on corruption charges, and there are a lot of people who believe that he should step down. In Israel, we don't have a two-term law the way you do in the States, meaning he's been in office already for 11 years, and he's supposed to stay on. He's in a rotation government, but basically the indictments for corruption has kind of put a heavy burden on his prime ministership, and there are a lot of people demonstrating on a regular basis actually for him to step down. And then he comes and pulls this rabbit out of the hat, which is amazing. And we need to talk about that because the smile on my face when I just think about what just now happened is amazing. Yeah.
So when you look at you're talking about the UAE deal and Bahrain and these different nations. So it looks like more Arab communities are going to be joining in the peace plan that is taking place. And I'm also going to ask you about this because the West Bank is not far from where you are sitting. 5 miles away, something like that?
No. East Jerusalem is literally about half a mile away.
A half a mile away?
East Jerusalem. Until 1967, if you remember, Jerusalem was divided into two. And I'm about half a mile from the Jaffa Gate, and Jaffa Gate actually was the divide between Eastern Jerusalem and Western Jerusalem.
So if you think of that is really close. So that puts the entire old city in Palestinian territory if the UN were to have their way. It would be the end of the Jewish quarter, it'd be the end of the Christian quarter, it'd be the end of so many things as they are right now. So you look at this.
So I will say, I don't see that happening. I don't see any situation where the Israeli people, the Israeli government, or any kind would hand over parts of Jerusalem in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, not in the current situation.
Yeah. I'd be shocked if that were to happen, very disappointed. But I know I hear rumblings that Palestinians aren't really excited about these peace deals that are taking place. However, fill us in from your perspective. You're on the ground there. You know what's happening. You look at this from the Israeli perspective. Is this good news?
Oh, totally good news. And again, I was down in the Judean desert area a little bit earlier this morning and yesterday. When I grew up in Israel, Israel was under direct existential threat, meaning we were worried that the state of Israel would be wiped off the map, and our Arab nation said, this is what we're going to try to do. I was 5 years old when the Six-Day War broke out, And I still remember a feeling of fear in my family that we might lose the war and be killed. I was 11 when the Yom Kippur War broke out, and we almost lost the country in a surprise attack in 1973. So what I'm trying to say is that there was a threat to the existence of Israel. I was a little baby lieutenant stationed in the Judean Hills, where we were actually trained to run a defense against an all-out attack by the Arab world through Jordan, up the road from the Jordan Valley to the city of Jerusalem. That seems impossible today. Not only impossible, we have a peace treaty with Jordan, and now we have a peace treaty with the Arab nations, meaning the peace is spreading out from Jordan and Egypt, which were the first Arab nations that made peace with us, to the rest of the Arab world. And it seems like we said, the UAE and Bahrain are not the first ones, not the last ones to make peace with Israel.
Yeah.
Now that's really interesting, because if you want to understand a little bit about this, basically the main obstacle for peace in the Middle East was the situation with the Palestinians, meaning the Palestinians saying this is our country, the Israelis saying this is our country, the wars that broke out, and the Palestinians not reaching any kind of an agreement with us all of these years. And now your president has said enough. Just like he said in a lot of different places, he said enough. I'm not waiting for the Palestinians to dance on the table the way they want according to the music. And it is in the interest of the different Arab nations around Israel to make peace with Israel. So he goes to Bahrain, he goes to the Emirates, he goes to Saudi Arabia, and he says, guys, me, the United States, Israel, and you can make a peace deal, okay? And what's happening is this is sidetracking or going around or outflanking the Palestinians who have been holding off everything for so long, saying, oh, it's all about us, it's all about us. The Arab world is saying it's not about you anymore, it's about what we need. And I think we owe your president a huge debt of gratitude.
Yeah.
Maybe one more thing. I am going to say this because, again, I'm an Israeli, so I shouldn't be messing in your politics. But if you want to know who is a better leader on the world stage, one of the rulers to use is his support for Israel. Look at who supports Israel more, and that'll tell you who is a more, I think, biblical leader in many different ways.
Yeah. Well, I would agree 100%. You know, I look at this and I am fearful on our end in America of what happens if Biden wins. I'm watching here in America, we have protests, the anti-Trump protests here. They're burning down cities. And then as they burn down the cities, they're blaming Trump for burning down the cities. We have fires all over the western United States. I'm sure you're watching these things from the other side of the world and observing these things. So I'm looking at this. Not only is Trump pro-Israel more than any other president we've ever had before, but also from the moral perspective, there's some real challenges there too. So I'm encouraging everybody I know, listen, vote for Trump. And people say, well, you're a pastor, you're not supposed to be telling us how to vote. I said, look, I'm telling you, this is a battle. This is a battle for survival. That's the way I see it. From your perspective, when you look at what's coming to Israel, if Trump doesn't win, from my perspective, it doesn't look good for Israel either at all.
Oh, no, totally. We're really afraid, and we're afraid on two levels. I'll see if I can explain why this is a problem. The first level is this. We live in a very bad neighborhood, and we have a lot of bullies in our neighborhood who have no love for us. It's a rough neighborhood. It's not a kind of neighborhood where you sit down and discuss things. It's a kind of neighborhood for the last 7 years that we've been fighting things. In this kind of neighborhood, in this kind of environment, strength is an asset. You cannot show weakness. Not only can you not show weakness, you have to have strong friends. I always said that the main problem that we had with your former administration, among all the other things, is the weakness that the United States of America was conveying to the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And when the United States of America is weak, our situation is more desperate. And then you elect a president who is the opposite of weak. He's a lot of different things, and maybe we can discuss Twitter, and we can discuss a lot of things. Like I like to say, I mean, we don't have to live with them, you guys do. But the thing is from our point of view, he has turned America into the superpower that it is, and has conveyed to the world that you don't mess with America. So these peace deals today are even part of that. This is America pushing out its influence over the Middle East for the right reasons in order to create peace. And that's what your former administration did not do. And that's what we believe that the next administration, if it is actually led by the Democratic Party, will not do. It will not exert its influence on the world to make the world a better place for people that you and I understand.
Yeah, I agree. I look and I think back to the former administration giving $150 billion cash to Iran in the whole nuclear peace balagan, which wasn't really about peace. And from as I look at it, you have Iran is still a major threat there. You have just north of the northern border of Israel, you have the Russia issue, you've got Iran, you have Hezbollah. And so when I look at these peace agreements, listen, Saudi Arabia and pretty much all of the UAE and the Arab communities, Iran is the bigger problem for them than anybody else.
Oh, definitely.
It's remarkable to me that tiny Israel, look at it on a map, everybody. Tiny Israel is the country that everybody needs to line up with themselves over in the Mideast for survival. It's really remarkable to see that.
Well, there's a black shift that's happening now in the Middle East, and some of the people like to compare it to the East-West blacks and during the Cold War, where you have one side and its affiliates and its ideals, and you have the other side with its affiliates and its ideals. Now, until now, Israel was in the middle and not really connected to the two blacks, because there was Sunni Islam on one side and Shia Islam on one side. Sunni Islam is Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, the more moderate, the Egyptians, okay? Shia Israel are the more, how do you say, radical. It is basically Iran, and later on Turkey. And these two blocks are actually pulling each one in its own direction. And here's the thing. Israel is not Sunni, is not Shia. But the Sunnis in their fight against the Shia, meaning Saudi and its affiliates, and it's a fight against Iran, its affiliates, needs Israel to cover its back.
Yeah. So,
and we've become a major asset to the moderate Muslims in this country. And your president was smart enough to understand that. And instead of going and apologizing to the Arab world for what they did, okay, he went in and said, this is what I want to happen, and I will use American influence to make it happen. And that's what's been happening. And again, that peace treaty on the lawns of the White House, it's amazing. It makes me feel more secure.
It is really amazing. Another thing that's really amazing is the left media in America wouldn't even cover it. All they talked about was the lack of social distancing at the meeting that was at the White House lawn. Remarkable, but they don't want to admit that this is just an incredible time in Israel. But I look back at the history of Israel, it's not a big surprise. God brought the Israelites out of Egypt. God did it. He parted the Red Sea. He brings them into the Promised Land. It wasn't because they were a great, powerful army, but he gave them the land, and they were able to conquer the enemy. You look at the time with Gideon, how God did it with a small army. You look at David and Goliath and the remarkable things that God. That's been the existence of Israel. The tiny people with this massive strength in the world. It's just evidence of how God is working and the remarkable things that are taking place there. And David, any final words? You have you have the Balagan Connection on YouTube, and people can go there. Balagan, we'll put up something so people can see it. They can also subscribe to it, Balagan, and you have fantastic little short videos you do on there. They're absolutely terrific.
Well, maybe here's one. I haven't made a video about it, but here's another connection. I think it's amazing that there are Israeli firefighters now on the hills of California fighting the wildfires in California.
I didn't even know that.
And that makes me shiver just to say that. I'll see if I could get.
Wow.
I'll see if I can get a link to kind of show some of that. But the fact that we're over there helping you fight your natural disasters, I mean, we've come a long, long way since a tiny little country in the corner.
That is, I had no idea, and I live pretty close to one of the fires that are burning right now. I had no idea until you told me. That is really incredible. Wow, the influence, as God said back to Abraham, way back in the book of Genesis, that you will be a blessing to the entire world. And you look at that connection that you just made. That's really quite remarkable for us. To find more of David, again, the Balagon Connection, go there. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel at Hope for Our Times. Until next time, shalom.
And next year in Jerusalem.